Assalamu alaikum. Hello everyone and welcome to our first lesson. I am Madam MARYAM SHARIFF, a chemistry and biology teacher at Bahari Girls National School. Today, I am very pleased to introduce a collaborative educational initiative with the Mewa Foundation. This is an organization that is based in Mombasa, which is deeply committed to the community welfare and, of course, its education. So today, we are going to start on our new series that is aimed at demystifying biological concepts and fostering a deeper understanding of the subject. We will mostly be tackling revision of different biology topics, which I personally believe will be highly beneficial to candidates. So our topic today will be on genetics. We'll discuss sample questions on different genetic conditions in order to gain a deeper understanding. Ready? Let's begin. Our first question. A family where the parents have normal skin pigmentation has 8 children. 2 are albinos and the rest have normal skin condition. Okay, so we have the following conditions that we need to answer. Now, before we do that, let us just first discuss what albinism is. Now, albinism is a genetic condition that affects a small percentage of the human population. So, when it comes to albinism, this is a disorder that is characterized by no production of melanin or maybe very little production of it. Now, melanin is a pigment that is present in our bodies. It's produced by specialized cells called melanocytes, and it's responsible for the color of our skin, our hair, and even our eyes. So individuals with albinism typically have very pale skin, white hair, and light-colored eyes. Such eyes may even appear reddish because of the blood vessels that are visible. Now, before we get into the question itself, there are a few things about this disorder that we need to mention. Number 1, the gene that is responsible for the production of melanin has 2 alleles, okay? That means it has 2 genes. So you're going to have gene number 1. This is the normal gene. It's assigned a capital A, okay? And of course, whenever in genetics you see a gene that has a capital letter, that means that it's dominant, okay? So this normal gene is responsible for the production of melanin. Now we also have a second allele, a second gene. This is assigned a small a because it's recessive. And this is the one that is responsible for albinism. So for an individual to have albinism, they need to have 2 copies of the recessive allele, such that their genotype is going to be AA. So 1 allele from either parent. Now, individuals that have 2 dominant alleles, AA, or those that have 1 dominant allele and 1 recessive allele as such, capital A and a small a, are going to have normal skin pigmentation. Normal skin, okay? But something for you to note. Individuals that have the genotype AA, the ones that are heterozygous. Heterozygous simply means that they have 2 alleles that are different, as is in this case. So individuals that have this genotype are going to be normal. They're going to have normal skin pigmentation, but they are going to be considered to be carriers. That means that they have this allele within their genotype. So there is a possibility that they can pass this on to their offspring. Okay, now let's tackle the questions themselves. Part A, what is the genotype of the father and the mother? So we're told that the parents have normal skin pigmentation, but surprisingly, 2 of their children are albinos. And we know that for a child to be an albino, they must inherit 1 allele from either parent. So if the parents are phenotypically normal, they have normal skin pigmentation, but they have albino kids, that means that they are heterozygous. So they have one normal allele and one allele responsible for albinism. And therefore, the genotypes of the father and mother are as such. Okay, part B. How many of their children are carriers for albinism? Show your working using a genetic cross. Now, to determine the proportion of carrier children, we will use a genetic crossing, okay? This is going to help us visualize the possible genetic combinations from a cross between the two heterozygous parents. Let's pause there. What do I mean by heterozygous parents? That simply means that the genotype in this case contains two different alleles. So you're going to have a capital A and a small a. The capital A represents the normal gene, okay? The small a represents the gene that is responsible for albinism. Now, why do we use caps? We use caps to differentiate between genes that are dominant from those that are recessive. A dominant gene will be expressed in the phenotype if you only have one of it. But for a recessive allele to be expressed in the phenotype, you need to have two copies as such. Okay, now there we have our crossing. So from the four possible genotypes, of the children, we can see that one will be normal, two will also be normal. They will have normal skin pigmentation, but they are going to be carriers. And one will turn out to be an albino. Now the question is asking us how many will be carriers. So out of 4, we have 2 being carriers. 2 out of 4. That makes it 50%. Okay, so if the total number of kids that the couple actually had were 8, that means that 50% of them will be carriers. 50% equals to 4 children. Now, I would like to say this. Each pregnancy is an independent event. This means that the genetic outcome of one pregnancy has absolutely no influence on the genetic outcome of any pregnancy that follows. Okay? Each of it is independent. However, the probabilities themselves will remain constant for each pregnancy, given that you have the same parental genotypes. Okay, let me explain it using this example. Imagine you have a coin and you're tossing it. So you have a 50% probability of getting heads, a 50% probability of getting tails for each toss. No matter how many times you've tossed it before, every time you do so, there's a 50% probability of getting heads or tails. But you might end up getting heads every time, or you might end up getting more tails than head. So the same applies to the pregnancy when it comes to genetic disorders. What I'm trying to put across is this. In theory, these are our predicted probabilities. But the reality, the actual outcome might not perfectly match our predicted ratios. I hope that was understood. Part C, what disadvantage do albino have over people with normal skin color? Okay, so individuals with albinism face several significant disadvantages. This is usually because of their lack of melanin. Now, melanin is very important. Not only does it give us our color, but it's also very important in protecting our skin and our eyes from the harmful ultraviolet rays of the sun. So here are a few disadvantages. Number 1, there's an increased risk of skin cancer. So as stated, melanin protects our skin from harmful UV rays. If you don't have enough melanin, you end up having a higher risk of developing skin cancers. Number 2 is you can have vision impairment. The absence of melanin in the iris can affect the development of the retina and even the optic nerves. So this can cause various vision problems. Lastly, it can also cause damage to your hair and skin. So the hair and skin of albinos tends to be easily damaged by exposure to the sun. This can cause it to be dry, even rough, and it can even lead to premature aging. Question number 2. Mr. Juma has sued Serenity Hospital on grounds that their child was wrongly identified such that they got the wrong child. The child is blood group O. Mr. Juma himself is blood group AB, while Mrs. Juma is heterozygous blood group A. Okay, so we have the following questions to answer. Now, kama kawaida, let us briefly discuss the concepts before we delve into tackling the question itself. Now, the ABO blood group system is one of the most important blood typing systems in humans. Its inheritance from parent to offspring usually follows the Mendelian laws of inheritance. So we have 3 main antigens on the surface of our red blood cells, and the presence or absence of these antigens determines which blood group you will end up having. Individuals that have blood group A have the A antigen on their red blood cells, and their genotype will either be AA or AO. Individuals with blood group B will have the B antigen, so their genotype will either be BB or BO. Individuals with blood group O lack antigens. They don't have antigen A or B, and as such, the genotype is or O. Back to the couple. So Mr. Juma has blood group AB, so that is also going to be its genotype, AB. The wife is A, so it could be AA or AO. But the question itself provided us with a very important hint. It told us that Mrs. Juma is heterozygous blood group A. Heterozygous means that with the genotype of Mrs. Juma, you are going to have 2 different alleles. And remember, the genotype can either be AA or AO. AA is homozygous, 2 identical alleles, while AO is heterozygous. And that is what Mrs. Juma's genotype is going to be. So, let us do a genetic crossing to find out if it's possible for this couple to have a child that will have the genotype OO and therefore that will have the blood group O. Those are the 4 possibilities. Do we see any of those possibilities having blood group O, which has the genotype OO? No. So, haiwezekani. Okay, part B. Is Mr. Juma justified in his claims? Yani haya anayoyasema ni kweli? Mtoto si wake? Yes, obviously mtoto si wake. Where is Mr. and Mrs. Juma going to get a child who has blood group O if they have the following 2 genotypes? So yes, he is justified because a child with blood group O cannot be theirs. Moving on to question number 3. 2/3 of any human population can roll their tongues into a U shape. 1/3 cannot do it no matter how hard they try. This characteristic is controlled by a pair of alleles represented by a capital R and a small r. Part A. If R is dominant, write down the possible genotypes of roller and non-roller. Okay, let's get down to it. So what is tongue rolling? Tongue rolling, as stated, is the ability to roll the sides of the tongue upwards into a U shape. You can try it right now. If you can do it, then you are a tongue roller. And if you can't on the first few tries, just give up. It means there's no way for you to do it. So you're either a tongue roller or you are not. Hakuna katikati. Okay. Now, this characteristic is controlled by a single gene that has two alleles. Remember, an allele is simply an alternative form of a gene. Now, the dominant allele is the one responsible for tongue rolling. It's assigned a capital R. Remember, because it's a dominant gene. If an individual has at least one R in their genotype, they can roll their tongue. So if you have an individual that has the following genotype, 2 capital R's or 1 capital R and 1 small r, then yes, they can roll their tongue. Okay? Okay. Now, the recessive allele is for non-tongue rolling. It's assigned a small r because it's recessive. So for a person not to be able to roll their tongue, they need to have 2 small r's. Okay. So let's continue. Okay, actually, let's answer the question. Write down the possible genotypes of roller and non-rollers. So we have 3 possibilities, okay? Possibility number 1 is individuals with the genotype RR, 2 capital R's. These are going to be able to roll their tongue, okay? They are referred to as homozygous dominant. Dominant because they have the dominant alleles, and homozygous because the 2 alleles are identical. Now, another possibility is RR, okay? 1 dominant allele and 1 recessive allele. As such, these will also be able to roll their tongue. Remember, as long as you have just 1 dominant allele, you will express that characteristic. Now, this is known as a heterozygous dominant. Dominant because it has the dominant allele. Heterozygous because the 2 alleles that are present are different from one another. And then the last one is whereby you are going to have 2 small r's. Such a person is not going to be able to roll their tongue. Now, this is known as homozygous recessive. Recessive because the alleles are recessive. Homozygous because they are alike. Okay, so our answer, the rollers are going to be that or that. Part B. A man and a woman, both of whom can roll their tongues, marry and produce some children who cannot roll their tongues. Explain how this can occur by the means of a Punnett square. Okay. So if both parents can roll their tongues, it means that they have the dominant allele. So the question is, do they have 1 dominant allele or do they have 2 dominant alleles? Since they have a child who cannot roll their tongue, that implies that both parents must be heterozygous. So both of the parents must have a recessive allele. So when it's passed on to the offspring, it causes the offspring to be unable to roll their tongue. So there is our Punnett square. And as you can see from the genotypes of the children, 1 out of the 4 kids will be non-rollers. So there's a 25% chance for their offspring to be non-rollers. And there we have it. Part C. Name the type of variation that explains this occurrence of tongue rollers and non-rollers in the human population. This is discontinuous variation. Now, this is a type of variation whereby you're going to have a characteristic falling into distinct categories. That means you either have the trait or you don't. You can either roll your tongue or you cannot. Hakuna katikati. So, discontinuous variation. Now, on to our next question. Now, in this question of ours, we have a couple. We have George and Grace, who had a son that was suffering from hemophilia, even though none of them showed signs of hemophilia. Okay, so George and Grace were not hemophiliacs, but surprisingly, their son was. So, Roman 1, state the genotypes of George and Grace. Okay, before we do that, let us briefly just discuss what hemophilia is. Now, this is a genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly. So, it can cause prolonged bleeding after injuries or cuts. because either the blood does not clot or it takes too long to clot. Now, this is an X-linked recessive disorder, meaning that the gene responsible for, for producing the clotting factors is located on the sex chromosome, specifically the X chromosome. And that is the reason why it's referred to as X-linked disorder. The gene is present on the X chromosome. So we know that females have 2 X chromosomes, okay, which makes the genotype XX. Males have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome, making their genotypes to be XY. Now, the allele for normal clotting is dominant, while the allele for hemophilia is recessive. Okay? Another thing that I would like you to note is this. Males are more frequently affected than females because males only have 1 X chromosome. So if they inherit the recessive allele on that X chromosome, that's it. They have this disorder. Females are luckier because they have 2 X chromosomes, okay? So what will happen is that either they can be completely normal with both alleles that are, are for the clotting factors, or they can be carriers. Who are carriers, you may ask? Carriers have 1 normal allele on 1 X chromosome and a second recessive allele on the other X chromosome. Now, it's this recessive allele that is responsible for hemophilia. But because the allele for hemophilia is recessive, when it's in the presence of a dominant allele, it will not be expressed. So it's going to be present in the genotype, but it will not affect the phenotype of the carrier. So they will not show symptoms, but they can pass it on to their children. So females only have this disorder if they inherit 2 recessive alleles, 1 on each X chromosome, which I might say is rare. So Roman 1, state the genotypes of George and Grace. So those are the genotypes. Now I want to say this. George does not show signs of hemophilia, right? We were told this. And because he only has 1 X chromosome, that allele that is present on the X chromosome needs to be normal. Remember, this allele is absent on the Y chromosome. Grace, on the other hand, is also said to be normal. But we are being told that the son is hemophiliac, so he must have inherited that allele from somewhere, and that somewhere is the mother. So that makes her a carrier. So she does not show signs of hemophilia, but has passed on the hemophiliac allele to her son. So that is going to be her genotype. She will have 1 normal allele and 1 hemophiliac allele. Roman 2. Using a genetic cross, work out the genotype of the couple's son. So there we have it. And if we look closely, we can see where the hemophiliac son is. Huyo hapo. Roman number 3. What are the linked genes? Okay. So linked genes are genes that are located on the same chromosome. It can be the sex chromosomes, or it can be any of the other, 22 pairs of chromosomes, okay? It's just general. If you have genes that are located on the same chromosome, these are said to be linked genes. So what happens is that during inheritance, during meiosis, they tend to be inherited together as a unit. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. As stated before, this is a series, so I'm hopeful that we are going to continue posting more videos. If you would like to expand your knowledge or gain a deeper understanding, you can also check out my YouTube channel called Cyclic for more videos on biology and chemistry. See you next time.